In the dark annals of human history, few places evoke the same level of horror and revulsion as Auschwitz, the infamous Nazi concentration camp that operated from 1940 to 1945. Located in southern Poland, Auschwitz was the largest of the Nazi camps and consisted of three main sites: Auschwitz I, Auschwitz II Birkenau, and Auschwitz III Monowitz. It was at Auschwitz II Birkenau that the majority of the camp's estimated 1.1 million victims, most of them Jewish, were exterminated in gas chambers. Within its barbed wire fences, unimaginable atrocities were committed, and one of the most chilling was the medical experiments conducted in Block 10. Block 10 was a special section of Auschwitz where Nazi doctors performed twisted experiments on helpless prisoners. The chief perpetrator was Dr. Karl Klauberg, who began his heinous work in April 1943. Klauberg's primary focus was on finding a cheap and efficient method of mass sterilization. He subjected hundreds of Jewish women to excruciating experiments, injecting caustic substances like formalin, phenol, and nitric acid into their uteruses and causing severe pain, infections, and often death. Klauberg's experiments were particularly cruel because he often performed them without anesthesia, leaving his victims conscious and screaming in agony. In a letter to SS leader Heinrich Himmler, dated June 7, 1943, Klauberg boasted, "The non-surgical method of sterilizing women that I have invented is now almost perfected. As for the questions that you have directed to me, sir, I can today answer them in the way that I had anticipated. If the research that I am carrying out continues to yield the sort of results that it has produced so far, and there is no reason to suppose that this shall not be the case, then I shall be able to report in the foreseeable future that one experienced physician with an appropriately equipped office and the aid of 10 auxiliary personnel will be able to carry out in the course of a single day the sterilization of hundreds or even 1,000 women." Another notorious figure in Block 10 was Dr. Horst Schumann, who conducted brutal experiments involving castration and X-rays. He exposed prisoners' reproductive organs to high doses of radiation, causing severe burns, mutilation, and sterility. Many of his victims died agonizing deaths from the effects of radiation poisoning. Schumann's experiments were particularly focused on Roma, gypsy prisoners, whom the Nazis considered asocials and targeted for extermination. In one infamous case, a Roma woman named Dina was subjected to radiation experiments that left her unable to walk. She was later killed in the gas chambers. These included high-altitude experiments using decompression chambers, where prisoners were subjected to rapid changes in pressure to simulate conditions faced by Luftwaffe pilots. Freezing experiments, conducted by Dr. Sigmund Rascher, involved exposing prisoners to sub-zero temperatures to test the limits of human endurance. Additionally, tests of experimental drugs and chemicals, such as sulfanilamide and phosphorus burns, were inflicted upon prisoners' skin and internal organs. The screams of the tortured echoed through the halls of Block 10. Stanislawa Leszczyńska, a Polish midwife imprisoned in Auschwitz, later recalled, "The cries of the women who were in terrible pain and the moanings of the unconscious women accompanied me day and night." Leszczyńska was forced to assist in the delivery of babies born to pregnant prisoners, many of whom were subjected to medical experiments. Despite the horrors she witnessed, Leszczyńska remained committed to helping the women in her care, later saying, "Every child must be saved. That was my goal." Other experiments in Block 10 included testing the effects of various poisons and gases, purposefully infecting prisoners with diseases like typhus and malaria, and subjecting them to extreme temperatures and pressures. The Nazi doctors viewed their victims as nothing more than guinea pigs, expendable in the pursuit of their twisted pseudoscience. One particularly cruel experiment involved subjecting prisoners to freezing temperatures and then attempting to revive them through various methods, such as immersing them in hot water. Many prisoners died as a result of these experiments, their bodies dumped in mass graves. One particularly disturbing experiment involved Dr. Josef Mengele, the infamous Angel of Death, who had a fascination with twins. He subjected pairs of twins to cruel and bizarre experiments, such as injecting dye into their eyes to try to change their color, or sewing them together to create conjoined twins. Most of these children did not survive the ordeal. Mengele's fascination with genetics and his desire to improve the Aryan race drove his twisted experiments. In a 1985 interview with the German magazine Bunte, Mengele's son Rolf said of his father, "He was so obsessed with science, so convinced what he was doing was right. He believed he was doing great things for mankind." In one particularly horrific case, Mengele personally killed 14 twins in one night by injecting chloroform into their hearts, earning him the moniker Todesengel, the Angel of Death. The exact number of victims who suffered in Block 10 is unknown, but estimates range from several hundred to a few thousand. The majority were Jewish women, but the experiments also included Roma, Gypsy women, Polish political prisoners, and Soviet POWs. Many of these women were young and healthy, chosen for their ability to withstand the torturous experiments. Others were selected because they had specific physical characteristics, such as different colored eyes or unusual physical features. Despite the unimaginable pain and trauma inflicted upon them, some brave survivors of Block 10 lived to bear witness to the atrocities. Among them was Marie-Claude Vaillant-Couturier, a French resistance fighter who testified at the Nuremberg trials. Her haunting words still resonate. "I saw the unseeable, that which human eyes should never behold." Another survivor was Vera Alexander, a Romanian Jewish woman who was subjected to sterilization experiments. In a 1994 interview with the USC Shoah Foundation, Alexander recounted her experiences. "I was taken to Block 10, and there they gave me injections. After the injections, I became very sick. I had a very high fever, and I had tremendous pain in my abdomen. The pain was so great that I couldn't sleep at night." As the Red Army approached Auschwitz in January 1945, the Nazis attempted to cover up their crimes. They hastily killed many of the remaining prisoners and destroyed evidence of the experiments. When Soviet soldiers finally liberated the camp on January 27th, they found a scene of unimaginable horror, with piles of corpses and emaciated survivors on the brink of death. One Soviet soldier, Ivan Martinoshkin, later recalled, "We saw emaciated, tortured, impoverished people. Those were the people I first encountered. We could tell from their eyes that they were happy to be saved from this hell, happy that now they weren't threatened by death in a crematorium, happy to be freed. And we had the feeling of doing a good deed, liberating these people from this hell." Block 11, echoes of agony in Auschwitz's execution yard. In the depths of human suffering, few places evoke the same visceral horror as Block 11 in Auschwitz-Wurst, the notorious concentration camp that operated from 1940 to 1945. Known as the Death Block, this foreboding structure bore witness to some of the most heinous atrocities committed during the Holocaust, its walls forever stained with the blood and tears of countless victims. Block 11 was a place of unimaginable terror, where the screams of the condemned echoed through the cold, damp air. It was here that the Nazis meted out their twisted version of justice, subjecting prisoners to brutal interrogations, torture, and summary executions. The building, also known as Block 13 before the camp's numbering system was changed, housed the camp Gestapo, the political department, and the prisoner cells in its cellar. The infamous inscription above the entrance, Arbeit macht frei, work sets you free, cruelly deceived the prisoners, for whom the only escape from Block 11 was often death. The cellar of Block 11 was a labyrinth of suffering, consisting of 4 corridors lined with cells of various sizes. The largest cell, intended for mass detentions, measured 7.8 x 3.8 meters and was known as Stay Bunker, standing cell, because it was designed to hold up to 120 inmates who were forced to stand all night in complete darkness due to lack of space. The smaller cells, measuring 1.5 x 1.5 meters, were used for solitary confinement and torture. Prisoners were crammed into these cells, often without clothing and deprived of food and water for days on end. Many died from suffocation, while others were driven to insanity by the relentless torture and isolation. One of the most infamous rooms in Block 11 was Cell 22, the starvation cell. Here, prisoners were condemned to a slow and agonizing death, deprived of food and water until their bodies wasted away. In September 1941, a group of Soviet prisoners of war, including men named Dubinin, Galevsky, Nikiforov, and Semenov, were locked in this cell and left to die. When the cell was opened weeks later, only 4 of the original 74 men were found alive, surrounded by the corpses of their comrades. The starvation bunker was a favored punishment for prisoners caught attempting to escape or those accused of sabotage or resistance activities. The courtyard adjacent to Block 11 served as the execution site, where thousands of prisoners were shot against the death wall by SS guards. The first executions took place on November 11, 1941, when 151 prisoners were shot. Among them was a Polish priest named Father Maximilian Kolbe, who had volunteered to take the place of another prisoner condemned to death. Kolbe's selfless act of sacrifice echoed through the camp, a glimmer of humanity amidst the darkness. His final words, spoken to his fellow prisoners, were, "Hate is not creative, love alone is creative." Kolbe was later canonized by the Catholic Church, becoming a symbol of martyrdom and selflessness in the face of evil. Stanislaw Grzesiuk, a Polish prisoner who survived Auschwitz, recounted the harrowing sights and sounds of Block 11 in his memoir 5 Years in Auschwitz. From the cells of Block 11 came the terrible, heart-rending screams and moans of the tortured, intermingled with the bestial bellowing of the torturers. It was a veritable hell on earth, a hell that could be seen through the small, barred windows of the cells. Grzesiuk himself spent time in Block 11, enduring beatings and torture at the hands of the SS guards. He described one particularly brutal guard named Gerhard Palitsch, who was known for his sadistic treatment of prisoners. He had a face like a bulldog, and he was always smiling, but it was a smile that made your blood run cold. When he smiled, you knew that something terrible was about to happen. The walls of Block 11 bore witness to the unspeakable cruelty inflicted upon the prisoners. Josef Kret, another survivor, described the sadistic methods employed by the SS. They would beat us with rifle butts, kick us and set dogs on us. They would hang us by our arms, which they had tied behind our backs. They would pour cold water over us and leave us hanging like that for hours. Kret endured multiple interrogations in Block 11, his body broken, but his spirit undefeated. He later recalled, "I knew that I had to survive, that I had to bear witness to what had happened here. That thought kept me going through the darkest hours." Block 11 also played a central role in the camp's resistance activities. In September 1944, a group of Sonderkommando prisoners who were forced to work in the gas chambers and crematoria staged a revolt. They managed to blow up Crematorium 4, using explosives smuggled into the camp by female prisoners who worked in a nearby munitions factory. The SS brutally crushed the uprising, executing 451 Sonderkommando prisoners in the courtyard of Block 11 as a warning to others. Among those executed was Zalman Gradowski, a Polish Jew who had secretly documented the horrors of the gas chambers. Before his death, Gradowski buried his manuscripts in the ashes of the crematorium, hoping that they would one day be discovered and serve as a testament to the atrocities committed by the Nazis. Block 24, the shadows of shame in Auschwitz's forced house of exploitation. In the sprawling complex of Auschwitz-Birkenau, a place synonymous with unimaginable human suffering and depravity, there existed a little-known but equally horrifying chapter in the camp's dark history. Located in Block 24 of the main camp, Auschwitz I was a brothel known as Puff, where female prisoners were forced into slavery for the pleasure of their Nazi captors and privileged male inmates. This institution, which operated from June 1943 until January 1945, stands as a stark reminder of the depths of degradation and exploitation faced by women during the Holocaust. Established in the summer of 1943 by order of SS leader Heinrich Himmler, The brothel was part of a larger system of rewards designed to increase productivity among the camp's slave laborers. The twisted logic behind the brothel was that it would serve as an incentive for male prisoners to work harder, with the promise of a visit to the puff as a perverse reward for meeting their quotas. This dehumanizing system reduced women to mere commodities, their bodies exploited in service of the Nazi war machine. Himmler's order, issued on June 22, 1943, stated, "In order to increase the work output of male prisoners, it is necessary to introduce regulated brothels in the concentration camps. The brothels should be staffed by women from the women's camps who volunteer for this purpose." The women forced into servitude in Block 24 were primarily Polish political prisoners, as well as a smaller number of German criminal inmates. Many were young, and all were subject to the same brutal conditions and treatment as other prisoners in the camp. They were given slightly better food rations and living conditions compared to other inmates, but this was merely a cynical ploy to keep them alive longer for repeated exploitation and mistreatment. The women were selected based on their age, appearance, and health, with many being lured with false promises of better treatment or even freedom. One of the most haunting accounts of life in Block 24 comes from Halina Brzozowska, a Polish prisoner who was forced to work in the brothel. In a testimony given years after the war, Brzozowska described the unimaginable trauma and degradation she endured. "We were treated like animals, worse than animals. They would beat us, force us to do the most degrading things, and we had no choice. It was either submit or die." Brzozowska, who was only 18 when she was sent to Auschwitz, endured months of mistreatment in Block 24 before being transferred to another camp. Her story is just one of many, a testament to the unimaginable suffering endured by the women of the brothel. The brothel was open for business in the evenings, with male prisoners granted access as a reward for their labor. They would line up outside Block 24, waiting their turn to mistreat the women inside. The SS guards oversaw the operation, collecting tickets from the men and keeping a watchful eye to ensure that their precious incentive system ran smoothly. The women were forced to service up to 20 men per night, their bodies and minds pushed to the breaking point. The tickets, which could be purchased with camp scrip or earned through good behavior, entitled the men to 20 minutes with a woman of their choice. The women had no say in the matter, their bodies treated as mere objects to be used by their captors. Irma Grez, one of the most notorious female SS guards in Auschwitz, was known to take sadistic pleasure in tormenting the women of Block 24. Grez, nicknamed the hyena of Auschwitz for her cruelty, would often personally select women for the brothel, subjecting them to humiliating inspections and brutal beatings. In a twisted display of power, she would force the women to remove their clothes and parade in front of the male prisoners, their shame and humiliation fueling her perverse satisfaction. Grez's sadism knew no bounds, as recounted by survivor Gisela Pearl in her memoir, "I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz." She took pleasure in selecting the most beautiful and healthy women and subjecting them to the most degrading and painful tortures. She would beat them, kick them, and set her dogs on them, and then she would send them to Block 24 to join the men. Despite the unimaginable suffering endured by the women of Block 24, some managed to find small ways to resist their oppressors and maintain a shred of dignity. Bronislawa Sucheka, another Polish prisoner forced into the brothel, recounted how the women would support each other and share what little food they had. "We tried to look out for each other, to keep each other sane," Sucheka recalled. "We would talk about our families, our homes, our dreams for the future. It was the only way to survive." The women would also find small ways to resist, such as secretly passing information to other prisoners or sabotaging the Nazis' efforts in whatever way they could. As the Red Army approached Auschwitz in January 1945, the Nazis began to evacuate the camp, forcing prisoners on brutal death marches to other locations. Many of the women from Block 24 were among those who endured these final, desperate acts of cruelty, their fate uncertain as they were marched away from the only life they had known for months or years. Some, like Brzozowska, survived the marches and the war, but the scars of their experiences would never fully heal. Others, like Alla Gertner, a Jewish prisoner forced into the brothel, were not so lucky. Gertner, along with 3 other women from Block 24, was hanged in January 1945 for her role in the Sonderkommando uprising, a brave act of resistance in the face of unimaginable odds. In recent years, efforts have been made to shed light on this often overlooked aspect of the Holocaust. Researchers and historians have worked to uncover the names and stories of the women who were forced into slavery in Auschwitz, giving voice to their experiences and ensuring that their suffering is not forgotten. Books like Mothers in the Fatherland by Claudia Kuhns and Ravensbrück, Life and Death in Hitler's Concentration Camp for Women by Sarah Helm have helped to bring attention to the unique struggles faced by women during the Holocaust. Block 4, the power of remembrance. In the heart of Auschwitz, first, the main camp of the notorious Auschwitz-Birkenau complex, stands Block 4, a building that once housed prisoners, but now serves as a somber memorial to the lives lost and the unspeakable atrocities committed during the Holocaust. Within its walls, a museum has been established, displaying poignant reminders of the victims' humanity and the devastating toll of hatred and genocide. The block, originally constructed in the late 19th century as a Polish army barracks, was repurposed by the Nazis after the invasion of Poland in 1939. It initially served as housing for Polish political prisoners before being converted into a storage facility for the belongings confiscated from incoming prisoners. As visitors step into Block 4, they are immediately confronted with a chilling sight: a massive glass display case filled with thousands of shoes, each pair representing a life cut short by the Nazi killing machine. The shoes, in various styles and sizes, from delicate children's sandals to sturdy work boots, were confiscated from prisoners upon their arrival at the camp. These humble objects, often the last remaining possessions of the victims, speak volumes about the individuals who once wore them, their ages, occupations, and the lives they led before being engulfed by the darkness of Auschwitz. The exhibit, which was first installed in 1955, has become one of the most iconic and emotionally charged displays in the museum. Among the sea of shoes, one can spot a pair of red, high-heeled women's shoes, a poignant reminder of the feminine grace and beauty that was so brutally extinguished. Beside them, a tiny pair of infant shoes serves as a heart-wrenching testament to the innocence and potential that was stolen away by the gas chambers. The sheer scale of the exhibit, with over 110,000 shoes on display, is a staggering visual representation of the immense loss of life and the scope of the Nazis' crimes. As Holocaust survivor and author Elie Wiesel once observed, "One pair of shoes, there's the whole world in one pair of shoes." Moving further into the museum, visitors encounter another haunting exhibit, a collection of suitcases, each bearing the name, date of birth, and transport number of its owner. These suitcases, carefully labeled by the victims themselves in the vain hope of one day reclaiming their belongings, now stand as silent witnesses to the shattered dreams and the lives that were so cruelly uprooted. Names like Olga Kafka and Marcel Spitzer are etched onto the worn leather, serving as a powerful reminder that behind every number there was a unique individual with a story to tell. The suitcases were discovered in a separate storage building after the liberation of the camp in January 1945, and they were later incorporated into the museum's collection. One suitcase, bearing the name Peter Eisler, born August 3, 1926, catches the eye. Peter, a young Czech Jew, arrived at Auschwitz on September 4, 1943, along with his family. His suitcase, a tangible link to his brief life, now rests in Block 4, a testament to the youth and promise that was so senselessly extinguished. The museum's collection of over 3,800 suitcases offers a glimpse into the diverse backgrounds and identities of the victims from all walks of life and corners of Europe. Among them is the suitcase of Vera Voriskova, a Czech Jewish girl who was just 11 years old when she was deported to Auschwitz. Her suitcase, adorned with colorful stickers and her name written in a child's handwriting, is a heartbreaking reminder of the 1.5 million children who perished in the Holocaust. As visitors continue their somber journey through Block 4, they encounter yet another poignant display, a vast collection of eyeglasses, twisted and tangled together in a haunting tableau. These glasses, once perched on the faces of the victims, now lie in silent tribute to the lives that were so brutally cut short. The exhibit, featuring over 40,000 pairs of glasses, is a stark reminder of the sheer scale of the destruction wrought by the Nazis and the indiscriminate nature of their killing machine. The display was first unveiled in 1955, and it has since become one of the most recognizable and emotionally charged exhibits in the museum. Among the sea of twisted metal and shattered lenses, one can spot a pair of delicate, wire-rimmed glasses, perhaps belonging to an elderly grandfather or a studious young girl. Beside them, a pair of thick, heavy-framed glasses serves as a reminder of the intellectuals, the artists, and the visionaries who were targeted by the Nazi regime. The glasses, like the shoes and suitcases, offer a deeply personal connection to the victims, humanizing them and forcing us to confront the immense loss of potential and talent. As Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist and Auschwitz survivor, once wrote, "The memory of a trauma suffered or inflicted is itself traumatic, because recalling it is painful, or at least disturbing. A person who is wounded tends to block out the memory, so as not to renew the pain." The exhibits in Block 4 also include a collection of prosthetic limbs, a grim reminder of the Nazis' twisted obsession with creating a master race and their ruthless treatment of those they deemed unfit. Among the display is a wooden leg that once belonged to a Polish political prisoner named Józef Żagna, who lost his limb after being shot during an escape attempt from the camp. Despite his disability, Żagna survived Auschwitz and went on to become a renowned artist and theatre director, using his experiences to create powerful works that explored the themes of oppression and resistance. Alongside these displays, visitors can view photographs and documents that provide historical context and shed light on the experiences of the victims and the inner workings of the camp. One such document is a list of 999 young Jewish women who were selected for forced labor at a Siemens factory in October 1942. The list, meticulously typed and bearing the signature of the notorious SS doctor Josef Mengele, is a chilling reminder of the cold bureaucracy that underpinned the Holocaust and the complicity of major corporations in the Nazi war machine. As visitors exit Block 4, they are left with a profound sense of loss and a renewed commitment to preserving the memory of those who perished. The museum's exhibits, in their stark simplicity, offer a powerful testament to the resilience of the human spirit and the importance of bearing witness to history's darkest chapters. In the words of Władysław Bartoszewski, a Polish resistance fighter and Auschwitz survivor, "The world must learn about what happened here and never forget. This is not just a Polish or a Jewish issue, it is a human issue that affects us all." Block 7, a glimpse into the darkest depths of human cruelty, in the heart of Auschwitz. First, the main camp of the infamous Auschwitz-Birkenau complex, stands Block 7, a building that once housed prisoners and bore witness to some of the most horrific living conditions ever endured by human beings. The block, originally constructed in the late 19th century as part of a Polish army barracks, was repurposed by the Nazis after the invasion of Poland in 1939 to serve as a prison within a prison, a place where the already inhumane conditions of the camp were amplified to unimaginable levels. The transformation of Block 7 into a site of unimaginable suffering began in June 1940, when the first Polish political prisoners were incarcerated there. As prisoners were herded into Block 7, they were confronted with a nightmarish scene of overcrowding, filth, and despair. The building, designed to accommodate around 200 people, was often crammed with up to 1,000 inmates at a time, leaving them barely enough space to lie down on the hard wooden bunks. The lack of proper sanitation and ventilation turned the block into a breeding ground for disease and misery, with the stench of sweat, blood, and human waste permeating every corner. In the words of Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist and Auschwitz survivor, "We lay squeezed together, with our heads on each other's feet and our feet on each other's heads, like herrings in a barrel." One of the most horrifying aspects of life in Block 7 was the complete lack of privacy and dignity afforded to the prisoners. The block was divided into small, cramped rooms, each housing up to 80 people. The bunks, stacked 3 levels high, were shared by multiple inmates, forcing them to lie shoulder to shoulder in a desperate attempt to find some rest amidst the constant noise and chaos. The overcrowding was so severe that prisoners often had to take turns sleeping, with some forced to stand or sit in the narrow aisles between the bunks. Józef Paczynski, a Polish political prisoner who was incarcerated in Block 7 in 1940, later described the nightmarish conditions. People were lying on top of each other in 3 layers. There was no space to turn over or stretch out. We were like sardines in a can. The living conditions in Block 7 were further compounded by the scarcity of basic necessities, such as food, water, and medical care. Prisoners were given meager rations of thin soup and stale bread, barely enough to sustain them through the long hours of forced labor and the constant threat of violence from the SS guards. The lack of clean drinking water and proper hygiene facilities led to the rapid spread of diseases such as typhus, dysentery, and cholera, which claimed countless lives. In a cruel twist of fate, the SS doctors who were tasked with treating the sick and dying in Block 7 often used their position to conduct brutal medical experiments on the prisoners, subjecting them to unimaginable pain and suffering in the name of so-called scientific research. One of the most poignant reminders of the suffering endured in Block 7 is the story of Mala Zimmertbaum, a young Belgian Jewish woman who was imprisoned in the block in 1942. Zimmertbaum, who had been arrested for her involvement in the resistance movement, was subjected to the same brutal conditions as her fellow prisoners, but refused to let the darkness of Auschwitz extinguish her spirit. She became known throughout the camp for her acts of kindness and courage, often sharing her meager food rations with those who were even more desperate than herself. In one particularly poignant moment, Zimmertbaum risked her own life to smuggle a piece of bread to a starving child, an act of selflessness that would become a symbol of the unbreakable human spirit in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Despite the unimaginable hardships she faced, Zimmertbaum never lost her sense of humanity or her will to resist. In June 1944, she and her Polish lover, Edward Galinski, staged a daring escape from the camp, becoming the first Jewish woman to ever break out of Auschwitz. Though they were eventually caught and executed, their story has become a symbol of the unbreakable human spirit and the power of love in the face of unimaginable cruelty. In the words of Elie Wiesel, the Nobel laureate and Auschwitz survivor, Mala Zimmertbaum was a heroine of the resistance. She fought not with weapons, but with her heart and her soul. Another haunting reminder of the horrors of Block 7 can be found in the stories of the children who were imprisoned there. Among them was Tova Friedman, a 6-year-old Jewish girl from Poland who arrived at Auschwitz in 1944 along with her mother and grandparents. Friedman, who was one of the youngest survivors of the camp, later recalled the unimaginable fear and confusion she felt as she was torn from her family and thrown into the chaos of Block 7. "I remember the bunk beds, 3 tiers high, and the crying and screaming of the children," Friedman recounted in a 2020 interview with The Guardian. "It was dark, and there was no food or water. We were so hungry and so thirsty. My mother kept telling me to be quiet, to not make any noise, because if we did, the Germans would come and take us away." Friedman and her mother managed to survive the horrors of Auschwitz, but the scars of their experience would never fully heal. For the rest of her life, Friedman would be haunted by the memories of the children who were not so lucky, the ones who disappeared into the gas chambers or succumbed to the unimaginable cruelty of the camp. Among them was the 4-year-old Italian boy, Sergio De Simone, who was subjected to brutal medical experiments by the notorious SS doctor Josef Mengele. De Simone, along with 19 other children, was killed by lethal injection to the heart in the final days of the camp's operation, a horrific act of cruelty that would forever haunt the survivors of Block 7. Block 21, Auschwitz's Infirmary of Despair. In the grim landscape of Auschwitz-Birkenau, where suffering and death reigned supreme, Block 21 stood as a macabre testament to the Nazis' utter disregard for human life. Designated as the camp's infirmary, this unassuming building bore witness to the final agonizing moments of countless prisoners who were left to die in squalor and agony, deprived of even the most basic medical care. The block, originally constructed in 1941 as part of the expansion of the Auschwitz-Wand camp, was repurposed in 1942 to serve as a makeshift hospital, a cruel mockery of the Hippocratic Oath and the principles of compassion and healing. As the tide of human misery and suffering swelled within the confines of Auschwitz, Block 21 quickly became a dumping ground for the sick, the weak, and the dying. Prisoners who fell ill or sustained injuries during the brutal regimen of forced labor were unceremoniously dumped in the block, their fate sealed by the indifference and cruelty of their captors. The conditions within the infirmary were nothing short of horrific, with patients crammed together on filthy, lice-infested straw mattresses, their bodies ravaged by disease and malnutrition. The stench of death and decay permeated every corner of the building, a sickening odor that clung to the very walls and seeped into the souls of all who entered. In the words of Primo Levi, an Italian Jewish chemist and Auschwitz survivor, the sick lay on the bare boards, without blankets, without straw, without food or water. The healthy were forced to sleep on top of them, on top of their excrement and vomit. One of the most haunting aspects of life in Block 21 was the complete lack of proper medical care afforded to the prisoners. The SS doctors who were assigned to the infirmary were often little more than sadistic charlatans, more interested in inflicting pain and suffering than in providing any semblance of treatment. Prisoners who were lucky enough to receive any medical attention at all were often subjected to barbaric procedures and experiments, their bodies used as guinea pigs in the Nazis' twisted pursuit of pseudoscientific knowledge. The story of Gisela Perl, a Hungarian Jewish gynecologist who was imprisoned in Auschwitz in 1944, stands as a powerful testament to the depths of human resilience and compassion in the face of unimaginable cruelty. Perl, who was assigned to work in Block 21, fought tirelessly to provide care and comfort to her fellow prisoners, often risking her own life to smuggle medication and perform secret surgeries. In one particularly poignant moment, Perl delivered a baby in secret, hiding the newborn beneath a pile of corpses to protect it from the SS guards. The child, a symbol of hope and defiance in the face of unimaginable darkness, was later smuggled out of the camp and survived the war. Perl's incredible story of courage and compassion was later immortalized in her memoir, I Was a Doctor in Auschwitz, which stands as a powerful testament to the unbreakable human spirit. Despite the heroic efforts of prisoners like Gisela Perl, the reality of life in Block 21 remained a nightmarish ordeal for the vast majority of those who passed through its doors. The infirmary was perpetually understaffed and undersupplied, with prisoners often left to fend for themselves in the face of debilitating illness and injury. Many of those who were admitted to the block never left alive, their bodies eventually carried out and burned in the crematoria that belched black smoke into the sky day and night. It is estimated that between 1941 and 1945, over 1.1 million people were killed in Auschwitz-Birkenau, with countless more suffering and dying in places like Block 21. The scope of the tragedy is almost impossible to comprehend, as emphasized by the words of Elie Wiesel. The Holocaust was not 6 million, it was 1 + 1 + 1. One of the most poignant reminders of the horrors of Block 21 can be found in the story of Eddie de Wind, a Dutch Jewish doctor who was imprisoned in the camp in 1943. De Wind, who was assigned to work in the infirmary, later wrote a harrowing memoir of his experiences, detailing the unimaginable suffering and despair he witnessed on a daily basis. The living lay with the dead, and both were covered with lice and filth, he wrote. The sick were crying, shouting, cursing, and praying. It was a picture of hell on earth. De Win's memoir, Last Stop Auschwitz, stands as a vital record of the atrocities committed within the walls of Block 21 and a powerful reminder of the importance of bearing witness to the darkest chapters of human history. Another haunting tale from Block 21 is that of Marian Kolodziej, a Polish Catholic artist who was imprisoned in Auschwitz in 1940. Kolodziej, who was assigned to work as a stretcher-bearer in the infirmary, later created a series of stunning and deeply disturbing drawings based on his experiences in the camp. The drawings, which depict the horrific conditions and brutal treatment of prisoners in Block 21, are a visceral and deeply moving testament to the human capacity for both cruelty and resilience in the face of unimaginable adversity. In Kolodziej's own words, "I am not a painter of pretty pictures. I paint to bear witness, to shout about what I saw." As we close this chapter of history, we are left with the haunting memories of the atrocities committed within the walls of Auschwitz. From the gas chambers of crematoria 2 and 3 to the unimaginable suffering endured in Block 11, the stories of Auschwitz serve as a stark reminder of the depths of human cruelty and the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on the lessons of Auschwitz, let us heed the wise words of Anne Frank, who said, "In spite of everything, I still believe that people are really good at heart." Remembering the atrocities of Auschwitz, we must focus on the goodness that can come from learning about the past, ensuring we work towards a future where such evil is unthinkable. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the darkest chapter of human history. Together, let us ensure that the memory of Auschwitz and the stories of those who suffered and died there are never forgotten. Goodbye, and may we always remember.